Hey everybody, welcome to Home Recording Made Easy and Mix Tip Tuesday, where every Tuesday I show you a new mixing tip to help you make more professional sounding mixes in your home studio. Before we get to this week's tip, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. Make sure you hit that notification bell and also stick around till the end of the video, because at the end of the video I have something I want to give you absolutely free that's really going to help you with your mixing training, so be sure to stick around. Okay everybody, welcome to this week's Mix Tip Tuesday video, and in this video I'm going to give you actually really 3 or 4 small tips into one tip video. Now this doesn't include plugins, this doesn't include anything fancy. This is something just 3 or 4 concepts that you want to keep in mind that'll not only help you produce better mixes, but more importantly more consistent mixes from mix to mix. And so these things are really important, and these are something things that are overlooked, especially by beginners. So tip number 1 for Mix Tip Tuesday is I want you to work on mixing at low volumes. And you may say, well, what does that mean, mixing at low volumes? Well, a lot of times what happens, and we all fall prey to this, is we're sitting in our studios, we got our speakers cranked up, or we're mixing with our headphones, or we're getting into the music and we turn it up, and we like loud music, right? We like it louder the better. And when we mix at loud volumes for long periods of time, a few things can happen. Number 1, first and foremost, is you're going to get ear fatigue. And what happens naturally with your ears is as your ears start to get fatigued, the eardrums are going to start to compress, they're going to start to close to protect themselves. And what ends up happening is you start to lose accuracy or the ability to really hear the high end of the mix more and more, because your eardrums are going to start to get fatigued, they're going to kind of compress, and you're going to lose that high end. And then what are you going to do? You're going to go ahead and you're going to jack up the high end EQ on your mix, and then you're going to export your mix, and you're going to go put that into a different listening environment. It's going to sound very ear piercing and very brittle sounding, or it could sound that way. And that is because you're mixing at high volumes and you're compensating for EQ as your ears start to protect themselves. So what I tell everyone to do, and I do this myself, whether you're mixing with studio monitors or on headphones or both, a combination of both, is I want to mix at low volumes, low enough to where if you and I were sitting next to each other in your studio in the control room mixing your song, that we can have a conversation at normal speaking voice while the mix is playing back and be able to hear each other. We shouldn't have to scream into each other's ears. We shouldn't have to raise our voices. It should be that low. Also, another good guideline is if you have your computer keyboard in front of you, you can be tapping on the keys and you should be able to hear the clack of the keys over the mix when you're listening to it. Now, when you first start trying to do this, if you're not used to mixing at low volumes, it can be a little off-putting. It takes a little bit to get used to, and the urge is to jack up the volume after 5 minutes. You go, oh, I can't mix like this. But what this is going to do is a couple of things. Number 1, it's going to save your ears. Number 2, it's going to force you to learn how to tune your ears and be more critical in the way you listen. And if you can get a mix to sound good at real low volumes where it's really balanced, a lot of clarity, you can pick out and listen for every piece of instrumentation inside of that mix, then when you turn that mix up, it's going to sound even better. So mixing at low volumes is really crucial. I have a video that I did a couple of years ago where I kind of demonstrated that with my iPhone and show you how I kind of do it. I'll link that in the description box below. You can check that video out, but if you just follow those guidelines, that's great. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't crank up the mix every now and again and check it at higher volumes. Absolutely, you should do that, but don't do that for long periods of time. The majority of your mix should be at low volumes. I'd say 80% of the time, mix at very low volumes, and then every now and again, you turn it up and check it for a minute or two, and then turn it right back down again. That is kind of our first tip here. Our second tip for this week's Mix Tip Tuesday is take breaks. Okay, what do I mean by that? When you're mixing a song from start to finish, if it's an average session, 24, 34, 40 tracks, something like that, between getting the session set up and adding all your plugins and all your processing, that mix could take anywhere typically from about 3 to 5 or 6 hours. And you don't want to be mixing that long consistently without taking any breaks. Once again, we want to protect our ears, even if we're mixing at low volumes. We want to take a break. We want to recalibrate our ears. Okay, when you're sitting in front of the speakers or you have headphones on for a long period of time, you start making poor judgments. And so what I recommend is not to mix for any longer than 45 minutes to an hour at any one sitting, okay? Work on the mix, put a timer on your phone or something on your computer where every 45 minutes, 60 minutes, you get up, you take a 5 or a 10-minute break. Walk out of the studio, get outside, get some fresh air, let your ears recalibrate, let your mind kind of recalibrate, and then come back and start working on your mix. Okay, so through the course of a mix, you may take 4 or 5 breaks. That's going to help you make better judgments, more accurate judgments on EQ, especially in your mix. Again, it's going to help also save your ears so you can do longer mixing sessions without having to worry about ear fatigue. Okay, so take breaks is super, super important. Okay, the third mini tip I want to give you this week is also, it's a good idea to at the very least, check your mix in mono. Now, I used to be one of the people that would tell a lot of my students several years ago to do a lot of your mixing in mono. I used to do at one time, I used to practice 75% of the mix was done in mono. The thinking is that if it sounds great in mono and you get the balance and you get the clarity, that when you bring it back to a full stereo mix, excuse me, it's going to sound even better. And although I still believe in that philosophy, I don't always mix in mono. I may just check the mix in mono. And really the reason for that is in today's world, most people listen to the final product in a stereo environment, right? Most people are consuming music on their earbuds, stereo, in their car, stereo, although it's not perfect stereo because you're not sitting exactly in the center, but you get the idea. They may be listening to it in their studios. You know, you have 2 speakers stereo or headphones stereo or on their computer. If you're going to have mixes where you know it's going to be played, you know, in a mono environment, such as, you know, department stores and grocery stores and single speaker type systems, if that's where the final mix is going to be played most of the time, if you're someone that mixes music for that kind of client or that kind of environment, well, then you want to do most of your mixing in mono. However, I highly recommend that even if you do most of the mix in stereo, it's always a good idea to fold it down to mono and just do a quick check and make sure that you can hear everything, okay? One thing that you got to just keep in mind is if you do a lot of hard panning left and right, when you bring things to mono, things don't always sit right. So you got to be careful about that. So it's kind of a balancing act. Every DAW, usually on the master bus, will let you turn the whole mix from stereo to mono. If you're using some kind of a control station hardware on your desktop, like the PreSonus monitor station or the Mackie Big Knob or something like that, they will have a mono button on that. You can use that as well. And then there's also, again, you could do it inside of the DAW. But I would recommend that you at least check the mix in mono, check it a couple of times. Even if that's not the final destination, it'll just give you a little more reassurance that the mix, from a balance point of view, from a clarity point of view, sounds the way that you want it, and then it'll sound even better in stereo. The third thing that I want to, or the fourth thing that I want to pass along to you today is last tip of this week's Mix Tip Tuesday is another good practice is to use a time limit on how long you spend on a mix. Okay, this is really important, and I still do this to this day, especially with client mixes, where once I get the song and all the audio imported, I get everything kind of organized and I start mixing, you know, not doing housekeeping tasks and prepping the session and all of that. That's set aside. That takes about 30, 40 minutes, depending on the session. But actually doing the mixing, where I'm adding plugins, doing editing, doing tuning, those types of things, I usually allow myself about 4 hours to mix an entire song from start to finish. Now, depending on the size of the session, it could take a little longer, could take a little less. But I don't allow myself to spend days and days and days working on a mix, because you can tweak the mix to death and never be done. You have to know when the mix is done. And a lot of ways to help you with this is to put time constraint on the mix. So a good guideline is give yourself, if it's, 20 tracks, 24 tracks, 30 tracks, give yourself a 4-hour time limit. So I'm going to allow myself 4 hours. And now if I have a mix broken down like I do here on the screen in front of us here, where we have drums, bass, guitars, keyboards, and vocals, that's what, 4 different sets of instruments. I may give myself an hour to mix each set. Or if the drums have more tracks, maybe I give an hour and 15 minutes to the drums, but then maybe I'm only giving 30 minutes to the acoustic guitars and the electric guitars or the bass or something like that. So I try to break down my mix into sections, and usually it's by grouping of instruments. And again, I try to limit the time. So over the course of 4 hours, you should be just about done. If it's taking you much longer than that and you're tweaking the thing to death, what you're going to find is that you're never going to finish anything. And then usually what happens when you mix for longer than that, you end up having so many decisions, so many tweaks that you have too many options, okay? And it just clouds your judgment. And so putting a time limit on your mix is going to help you. And as you get better and you set up things like templates and you speed up your workflow, and I have tons of videos on that in our playlist on the YouTube channel here, you'll even be able to get that 4 hours, maybe even down to 3 hours. And again, so that's just another good guideline. Again, put a timer on your smartphone. Don't let it take you more than 4 hours. Set yourself a goal and say, 4 hours, I'm going to be done. I'm going to get in there. I'm going to make my adjustments. I'm going to make my decisions. I'm going to commit and I'm going to move on. The more you practice that philosophy over time, the more consistent your mix will be. So those are 4 tips in review. We want to mix at low volumes. We want to take breaks every 45 to 60 minutes to protect our ears. We want to check our mixes in mono, and then we want to give ourselves an overall time limit, no more than 4 hours to do a mix, unless you got a huge session. If you have a huge session, you can adjust for that. Those 4 things used consistently will not only turn out better mixes for you, but more importantly, they'll also turn out more consistent mixes for you. And you'll start to develop your own sound and your own mixing style, which is super important. So I want to thank you for watching the whole video here. As I said, now I want to give you a free gift. First thing I want to do is I want to tell you, if you have not been to homerecordingmadeeasy.com, you need to go to homerecordingmadeeasy.com. Why? Because I'm going to give you 5 free mixing training courses. So you could take all of these Mix Tip Tuesdays, all the stuff that I've been teaching you every single Tuesday, and you can apply them to 5 different songs, different styles of music, and you can mix the song along with me. You get all the audio files. 5 free courses at homerecordingmadeeasy.com. Go there, click on the big orange button on the homepage. You can't miss it. Get your 5 free courses today. I also want you to check out a mixing membership website that I have. If you really want to dive into the craft of mixing and learn it in a very non-technical way, head on over to mixingmadeeasy.net. We do a lot of more in-depth mixing training. If you're new to mixing or an intermediate that's been mixing for a year or 2 and you struggle to get your mixes to the next level, mixingmadeeasy.net is for you. And if you click the link in the description box below, for a limited time, I want to give you 40% off our annual membership at mixingmadeeasy.net. Click the link in the description box below. The 40% and already taken off. You get a full year of mixingmadeeasy.net, 12 different songs to mix, watching me mix the song from start to finish in real time. You get all the audio files. We use different plugins. You can enter our mixing contest every month, where I'm giving away free plugins and free studio gear. All the information is at mixingmadeeasy.net. Click the link in the description box. Watch the video at home at mixingmadeeasy.net. Learn all about the membership, and then get your 40% off our annual membership. But that's for a limited time, so you got to act now. Check that out. I promise you, your mixes will get exponentially better if you're a member at mixingmadeeasy.net. Lastly, I want to hear from you. What mixing tips do you have beyond the 4 that I just shared? What things have you found over the years through your learning of the craft of mixing that maybe you can share with our other members, and maybe teach me something too? Leave comments below. I want to hear from you, and I want to know what other great mixing tips you have to make your mixes more consistent. And until next week's Mix Tip Tuesday video, I've been Dave with homerecordingmadeeasy.com and mixingmadeeasy.net. Thanks for watching, and I will see you soon. Take care.